Hey folks, it's Keith, Victor Echo 3 Sierra Victor Quebec, also known as the Shaky Key for what I used to say were my Morse code abilities back in the early 1990s. Changed a little bit since then for the better. So what I thought I would do, I would take a look at what I call POTA, or Parks on the Air for Seniors. And it's an interesting topic because if you go on to any of the YouTube video sites and you're looking around and you see what people are using, you see the type of equipment they have and so on, the campers and whatever else. It's pretty daunting if you're a senior. You know, how many of you watching this video maybe were really into ham radio back through the 90s into the early 2000s, and then suddenly you just sort of got bored, tired, and now your radio has sit there for quite a few years, gathering dust. I know that was mine. Now, part of that was work. The job I had at the time was not conducive to having a lot of time for ham radio, and that was another contributing factor. But as we age, certain things generally take place, not for all of us, but for a lot of us. One, we definitely slow down. We have health issues, mobility issues, and so on. We also become much more isolated. In some cases, many cases actually, the only person you're going to talk to in a given day is your spouse. Ham radio can bridge that gap. Ham radio can open up horizons for you and so on. Parks on the Air is definitely one of those. Now, when I found it, it was purely by accident. I used to do a lot of contests when I first got into ham radio. I was very, very big into that. And every year there would be a couple of contests that would be on, which I might crank up my radio for, 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever. And give people, as I should say, give people points. It was on one of those when I was just scrolling the dials because I just like to do it that way. I like the sort of hunt and pounce type approach. So I was doing that, and I was coming across people calling CQ POTA. What the hell was POTA? So you listen enough, and you're going to hear someone call CQ POTA, CQ Parks on the Air. That started my journey into this. Let's see, what is Parks on the Air? What's going on? So even though it had been going on at that point, I think what was started in 2016, I think it was, and I found it in 2021, been going on for a long time. I didn't even know they were out there. And I suspect many of you watching this video didn't know they were out there either. But that started a whole new chapter for me, and it will for many of you. Now, one of the good things for seniors is when you get interested in Parks on the Air, it does break that isolation. You have people to talk to. You have people to hunt, in this case, parks to hunt. It gives you something to think about, something to plan for. So it's quite beneficial. Gets you thinking. Start looking at your equipment again and so on. All these different things. And it can be done almost anywhere because Parks on the Air is divided into really two sections or two parts, if you want. There's the hunters and there's the activators. A lot of seniors can have tremendous time hunting other parks all over North America, all over the world for that matter. So it can become actually a little bit obsessive when you're getting close, when you're getting close to an award for 100 parks. Yeah, you're going to put the time in to try and get that 100. So I think it's a really good idea for that. Now, what do? We go on the air. We look up Parks on the Air, whatever, in YouTube. And what do we see? We see a lot of younger folks, a fair number of older folks too out there having fun. So now it gets more interesting because you're looking at people your own age in the field. Do you have to go in the field? No. You don't ever have to activate a park in your life. But you can hunt. How? The comfort of the chair in your office. from your radio in the bedroom, from your radio in the basement, maybe from the balcony or the deck of your house or backyard picnic table. You can hunt from all over the place. So then again, it's going to get you thinking, it's going to get you active. You will meet a lot of new people. I know when I started, I at one point built a lot of antennas and haven't done that in many, many years now, not since the 1990s. And I don't want to do it again, okay, to put it that way. And I know when I was thinking about doing some of this, and I wanted a simple thing, the Anderson power clips. And I wanted to make some, hook it up to my radio so it would be a little bit more portable. Do you think I could figure it out? I had used them years ago, and I was just having problems. It turned out to be a simple one. Was solved in no time. I just put a little note on one of the Facebook groups for the Ottawa area, and I said, is there anyone out there who can help me with these Anderson power clips and get them sorted out for me so I know what I'm doing wrong? I had 2 people come back within a couple of hours. And one of them was very nice. He said, bring your radio. There's a park not too far from you. Bring your radio. I'll meet you there, and I'll show you how to do it. And he did. And after that, of course, I came back home and finished up what I wanted to do on that radio and even on another one. The people out there, the ham radio operators out there, especially those involved in parks, I find are exceptionally open, kind, and willing to help. Something that ham radio was always about anyways. So it's a good chance for you to do that. Now, I find a couple of issues with what I see on YouTube. So if we look at the gear, my goodness, there's some wonderful radios out there. And if you notice, as we go along, there are some people out there who, let's call it review, or talk about this new radio, that new radio. They rarely mention the price. I like the ones that tell me what it's going to cost. Because if it's in American dollars, I know I have to add at least 30% plus charges to bring it across the border and so on. Big difference in price. But some of them get radios and you see them, who knows, once a month or whatever, and they have a new radio. That's pretty daunting if you're an old guy trying to save your pennies, living on a fixed income and worried about how you're going to pay your bills. Never mind go out and buy another $1,800, $2,000 radio. So I think that's a little deceiving when you go on. It's a little daunting because you do see these radios and they're wonderful. They do a great job. But keep in mind, a lot of these people receive radios from various distributors, right? They know that they have a very big YouTube channel. So of course they send them a radio and say, try it out. Give us your opinion. Maybe make a video on it. It's great publicity for that company. But for the rest of us looking at this, where you don't realize that's what's happening, it's a little daunting. How am I ever going to afford that? And then you look at the radios that are out there now, especially for the parks on the air or summits on the air. They're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Going pretty much the way the old walkie-talkies, right? The 2-meter rigs went. Remember those nice ones that were the size of a brick? Excuse me, they were the size of a brick. You could look at it, you could read the screen. The buttons and everything were big enough that you could push them. And then they got smaller and smaller and smaller. Hey, but these eyes, I can't use most of those little handy talkies that are out there now. I can't even read the screen. So I think for the manufacturers, keep that in mind. There's a lot of older hams who are getting back into ham radio. We like a screen that you can actually read. Not one that you have to stare at or maybe change your glasses or adjust them if you're wearing trifocals or whatever the case might be. Something to keep in mind. And of course, again, as part of Parks on the Air, a lot of the activators go out and they camp. They either have a big RV, 40-footer or whatever, They have tents. They have all sorts of equipment for camping. Maybe pull a trailer, all sorts of stuff. You and I aren't going to do that. We don't have to do it. It's wonderful that they do because they're really helping the hobby. But at the same time, that's not an expense you have to pay. You can have a lot of fun driving over to a park or getting someone to drive you to a park, even, son, relative, family, friend, drop you off in a park for 2 or 3 hours or have a picnic in a park. You don't need to have that huge RV, that fancy tent, the mosquito meshing and all this stuff. You can still have a lot of fun. So that's part of what I want to look at. Look at some of the antennas you can use. Again, there's another example. I look at someone and they go out and they say, here's my antenna, whatever it happens to be. There's all sorts of different ones that people are using, promoting, whatever. And I go and I look it up. And I'm going, my goodness, $500 US, add 30%, add shipping. Why on earth would I ever spend that amount of money to simply have an antenna that works in a park when all I really need to do is string a wire? So those are the other issues. And I think if you're getting into Parks on the Air as a senior, enjoy those videos because you can see that people are having fun. They're contributing to the hobby, which is important. They're getting other hams, older hams like you, interested. And that's an important factor. But don't get tied up in thinking you have to do all of that. Because quite honestly, you don't. Now, when I found it, and like I said, I found it purely by accident, realized there were a couple of parks. Actually, one park's about 15 minutes from my house. So I realized if I wanted to activate a park, I really could. But I was interested at that point more in the hunting. So what do you do? Well, where's your radio? Is it sitting on your desk, covered in dust? Is it, as in many of us, sitting in that big bin in the basement where all your radio gear was eventually put, when you realized that it was taking up too much room on your desk or whatever? I would start there. Use your old radio. It doesn't matter what it is. If your only radio is, a wonderful Heathkit HW101, which was one of my great radios, use that. If you've got maybe an old Kenwood or an old Yaesu or an old ICOM down in your basement somewhere, it's not being used, bring it up. Use that. You can use whatever you have. There's absolutely no need to go out and buy a new one. Certainly not in the early stages, and certainly not if you're just hunting. Now, if you have an antenna, what do you have up? Do you still have your old antenna? I did. Mine was put up in 2003, an MFJ 1796. So was it 6-band antenna? So that was 2003, and I was getting back into this in 2021. A little bit of work, went out, checked it all out, made sure everything was tight, everything looked good, looked at the coax and said, no, that's got to be replaced sooner or later. That's my expense coming up, will be to replace the coax. And started using it. Started making contacts, started getting parks, accumulating them quite quickly. And even got to the point at one stage where I thought, let's try some QRP. Turned my radio down to 5 watts and was doing QRP for a while. So all of a sudden, hunting parks, being on the air, talking to people, meeting with people, became something to do. And it opened a whole new world. And now, if you're a senior alone at home, you're no longer isolated. There's lots going on there. And an interest in Parks on the Air will open up other doors as well that you like. So as I said, this is just going to be a quick intro. I like to keep these videos fairly short if I can. But this is what this one's going to be all about. There'll be other ones. I'll take a look at some of the antennas, ones that I use and ones that you can use. Of course, there's always the ones that you can see on YouTube where someone's got a wonderful brand new antenna. But there's some relatively inexpensive ways to do this, inexpensive ways to sort of operate in a park or activate a park. You don't need to use Morse code. If you know it, great. If you used to use Morse code at one point, here's an excellent opportunity to refresh, to get back and get on the air using Morse code. A lot of people only do the single sideband. Some do the FT8. But there's something for everyone. What's your interest? Would you be willing, if you could drag everything out of the basement and hook it up again? Is chasing parks on the air something that you might want to do? It's a quick introduction to what I'm trying to prove here, which is that if you're a senior, you can definitely do parks on the air. It will definitely be a benefit for you, and it will be a lot of fun. So stay tuned. We'll probably have a few more videos along the same theme, looking at some of the things that I've used, which I've made do with, simply because I'm not in a position where I spend an awful lot of money on radios, antennas, gear, and what have you. I'm like a lot of you. Follow along over the next few weeks, and I'll add part 2, 3, whatever it takes, just to give you a quick look at some of the simple ways that you can do this. Answer me below. Do you think this will help you? Do you think this might get you interested in looking at your radio and working on your radio again? And above all, will it help to break some of your isolation? It's Keith. If you like this video, please like, share, subscribe. The E3 SBQ, the shaky key. Wishing you a great day.